Then tell me, future boy, who's president of the United States in 1985?
Ronald Reagan.
As they said in the film, Back to the Future, where we're going, we don't need roads.
Welcome to your life.
There's nothing a retired governor can do, but a president, now he can do a thing or two.
Welcome to another show. With the success of the recent biopic on President Ronald Reagan, I thought we'd look at actors who played the 40th President of the United States. Thanks for joining me today. Ronald Wilson Reagan was the subject of a recent Hollywood movie, so I thought I'd look at his portrayal and cultural depictions. First, let's take a brief look at his life. Ronald Wilson Reagan, born February 6, 1911, was an American politician and actor who served as the 40th President of the United States from 1981 to 1989. A member of the Republican Party, his presidency constituted the Reagan era, and he is considered one of the most prominent conservative figures in American history. He was born in a commercial building in Tampico, Illinois, and was the younger son of Nellie Clyde Wilson and Jack Reagan. Nellie was committed to the Disciples of Christ, where young Ronald discovered his faith. Reagan attended Dixon High School, where he developed an interest in drama and football. Reagan was raised in the small towns of northern Illinois. He graduated from Eureka College in 1932 and worked as a sports broadcaster on several regional radio stations.
If I had it all to do over again, I'd come right back here and start where I was before.
Reagan arrived in Hollywood in 1937. Debuting in Love Is on the Air, using a simple and direct approach to acting and following his director's instructions, Reagan made 30 films.
Talking with Governor Reagan, what would you say was your worst movie?
This picture was called Code of the Secret Service.
That's what they're doing, all right. Bleaching dollar bills and reprinting them in higher denominations on those stolen plates.
And this fellow tomorrow night's our only lead. That's why I've got to meet him.
What about Bedtime for Bonzo? That's one of my favorite films you were ever in.
Well, now listen, the funny thing is, Bedtime for Bonzo was quite a box office smash.
Strong, handsome man, just like your daddy. Then you'll have Swedish pancake, too.
That's outright bribery.
Bonzo! It was a good picture. It was a very funny comedy because it was based on truth. It was based on the type of experiments that they've been doing at Duke University with chimps. And the idea was, I was a psychology professor trying to raise a chimp as you would a baby.
Brakes are beating the boys. Ask them to go in there with all they've got. Win just one for the Kipper.
He broke out of these types of films by portraying George Depp and Newt Rockne, All-American, which would be rejuvenated when reporters called Reagan the Kipper. At the same time, he campaigned for President of the United States. Afterward, Reagan starred in King's Row as a leg amputee, asking, "Where's the rest of me?"
Where's the rest of me? Randy.
You're straight.
His performance was considered his best by many critics. Reagan became a star, with Gallup polls placing him in the top 100 stars from 1941 to 1942. Reagan served as the president of the Screen Actors Guild twice from 1947 to 1952 and from 1959 to 1960. During the 1950s, he worked in television and spoke for General Electric. World War II interrupted the movie stardom that Reagan would never be able to achieve again as Warner Brothers became uncertain about his ability to generate ticket sales. Reagan had a limited acting range and was dissatisfied with the roles he received. As a result, Lew Wasserman renegotiated his contract with his studio, allowing him to also make films with Universal Pictures, Paramount Pictures, and RKO Pictures as a freelancer. With this, Reagan appeared in multiple Western films, something that had been denied to him while working at Warner Brothers. In 1952, he ended his relationship with Warner Brothers but went on to appear in 53 films, his last being The Killers. From 1947 to 1960, he was president of the Screen Actors Guild. Reagan married Jane Wyman in 1940, and they had 3 children, daughters Maureen and Christine, and an adopted son, Michael. Wyman left Reagan after he began to enter politics, but Reagan would always remain close to his children. He later married another actress, Nancy Davis. Reagan began his political career as a Democrat, viewing Franklin D. Roosevelt as a hero. He fought against right-to-work laws and spoke out against racism and the Ku Klux Klan. He switched political parties in 1952 under Eisenhower and supported Nixon and Goldwater. Reagan's A Time for Choosing speech during the 1964 presidential campaign elevated him as a new conservative figure.
No nation in history has ever survived a tax burden that reached a third of its national income.
He became governor of California in 1966 and remained governor until 1975. During his governorship, he raised taxes, turned the state budget deficit into a surplus, and implemented harsh crackdowns on the free speech movement. He first ran for president in 1968, but lost in the primaries to Richard Nixon. After challenging and losing to incumbent President Gerald Ford in the 1976 Republican presidential primaries, Reagan won the Republican nomination and then a landslide victory over incumbent Democratic President Jimmy Carter in the 1980 presidential election. On March 30th, 1981, Reagan was shot by John Hinckley Jr. outside the Washington Hilton. James Brady, Thomas Delahanty, and Tim McCarthy were also struck, although right on the margin of death. Upon arrival at George Washington University Hospital, Reagan underwent surgery and recovered quickly from a broken rib, a punctured lung, and internal bleeding. Professor J. David Woodard says that the assassination attempt created a bond between him and the American people that was never really broken.
I am not going to exploit, for political purposes, my opponent's youth and inexperience.
In 1984, he beat former Vice President Walter Mondale in one of the largest electoral landslides in history. Reagan presided over the tense state of affairs with Russia, which led to arms reduction talks and saw the tearing down of the Berlin Wall.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
A dark point in his otherwise illustrious career as president was in the Iran-Contra hearings.
The board is convinced that the president doesn't indeed want the full story to be told. And that will continue to be my pledge to you as the other investigations go forward.
Reagan was accused of procuring the release of 7 American hostages held by Hezbollah by selling American arms to Iran, then engaged in the Iran-Iraq war in hopes that Iran would pressure Hezbollah to release the hostages. Reagan was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease in 1992. He passed away on June 5, 2004. Before we look at actors who portrayed Ronald Reagan, let's look at his appearances in comic books. Soul Sun Productions met Ronald Reagan, George Bush, and other members of the Reagan White House, who became superpowered, G.I. Joe-like commandos and battled terrorists in Reagan's Raiders. Marvel Transformers UK Annual 1985 contained a story called Plague of the Insecticons. Optimus Prime led Prowl and Warpath to a meeting with President Ronald Reagan in Washington, D.C. to open a dialogue between the Autobots and the U.S. government. The evil Insecticons attacked the U.S. military in the name of the Autobots, hoping to derail the peace talks. Although the Autobots managed to chase off the Insecticons, Optimus Prime gave up on explaining the misunderstanding to Reagan, thinking he would never be believed. Reagan was ready to hear what Optimus had to say and was disappointed they had given up so quickly. In 1986, Ronald Reagan appeared in Volume 1, Issue 8, of the DC Comics series Booster Gold. In the 1986 miniseries The Dark Knight Returns, Superman is an operative for the United States government, covertly fighting Soviet forces in Latin America and serving as the president's right-hand man. Though unnamed, this president resembles Reagan, who was in office when the comic was published. He also possesses Reagan's folksy way of speaking.
Somebody get a stretcher!
No.
Back up.
No.
Would you show me the area where the attempted assassination of Reagan took place? The guy said, sure. He got me a security man. He said, I'll show you. So they actually walked me through the entire event. 3 weeks later, I get a script, and it's the day Reagan was shot.
Now, let's look at the actors who portrayed Ronald Reagan. The Day Reagan Was Shot is a 2001 American made-for-television drama film directed by Cyrus Norast and co-produced by Oliver Stone. The film stars Richard Dreyfuss as Alexander Haig and Richard Crenna as Ronald Reagan. The film premiered on Showtime on December 9, 2001. The film is loosely based on events surrounding the Reagan assassination attempt on March 30, 1981, by John Hinckley Jr. It depicts a media frenzy, a divided White House cabinet and staff with little control, and a fictional threat of international crisis. Richard Dreyfuss felt he was miscast as Alexander Haig, but thought it was fun.
It's just that there are so many questions.
Well, tell him to ask that bastard, that lying son of a gun, Oliver North. Ask him who gave the money to the Contras.
Came to me and I said, this is the stupidest idea I've ever heard. I'm not even going to read it. I'm sorry. They came to the house and sat there while I read for 20 minutes, and I went, oh, this guy's weird. And then when it was done, people said, I never quite liked Reagan before, but now I really like him after seeing your picture.
The Reagans is a 2003 American biographical drama television film about U.S. President Ronald Reagan and his family. It was directed by Robert Allen Ackerman and written by Jane Marchwood, Tom Rickman, and Elizabeth Egloff, based on the 1991 biography First Ladies Volume 2 by Carl Sferrazza Anthony. It stars James Brolin as Reagan and Judy Davis as First Lady Nancy Reagan. CBS planned to broadcast it as a two-part miniseries in November 2003 during fall sweeps. However, due to controversy over its portrayal of Reagan, it was ultimately broadcast as a film on November 30th of that year on cable channel Showtime.
Staff has been trying to get me to stop. You think you could help me to keep this going?
Absolutely, Mr. President.
Alan Rickman played Ronald Reagan during a scene in The Butler, which starred Forrest Whitaker as Cecil Gaines. It is a 2013 American historical drama film directed and co-produced by Lee Daniels and with a screenplay by Danny Strong. It is inspired by Will Haygood's Washington Post article A Butler, Well Served by This Election, loosely based on the real life of Eugene Allen, who worked in the White House for decades.
President, this is the worst possible thing you could do right now. Last time I checked, I am in control here.
Killing Reagan is a 2016 American television drama film directed by Rod Lurie and written by Eric Simonson. It is based on the 2015 book by Bill O'Reilly and Martin Dugard. The film stars Tim Matheson and Cynthia Nixon. The film premiered on the National Geographic Channel on October 16, 2016. Reagan appeared as a fictional supporting character in the Inhumanoids episode The Surma Plan as President of the United States. Upon learning that the Soviet leadership was planning an Earth-threatening attack on the lair of the Inhumanoid leader Metlar,
a leader who will unleash their great strength and remove the roadblocks government has put in their way.
In the second season of the television series Fargo, Bruce Campbell's Reagan stops during his second presidential campaign in 1979 in the titular town. Campbell previously appeared on a television screen in the 1996 film Fargo and is credited as a soap opera TV star.
Welcome to the Cafe 80s, where it's always morning in America, even in the afternoon.
In Back to the Future Part 2, Reagan has his own Max Headroom-style AI who speaks in his voice, stutters just like Max, and serves as a waiter in the Cafe 80s.
I would not like to see any political party outlawed on the basis of its ideology, because I still believe, Mr. Chairman, that democracy can handle it.
That brings us to the current film in theaters now starring Dennis Quaid, a 2024 American biographical drama film directed by Sean McNamara and written by Howard Klausner, based on Paul Kinger's 2006 book The Crusader, Ronald Reagan and the Fall of Communism. The film stars Dennis Quaid as President Ronald Reagan alongside Penelope Ann Miller and John Voight. In 2012, John Voight was in discussions to portray Viktor Petrovich, whom Kingler said is a character based on several KGB agents and Soviet analysts who we now know were tasked with keeping tabs on Ronald Reagan for many years. On the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, 17% of 63 critics' reviews are positive, with an average rating of 4 out of 10. The website's consensus reads, while Reagan the movie undoubtedly admires Reagan the man, its cloying and glossy rendering of history flattens the 40th U.S. president into caricature. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of A on an A+ to F scale, while those surveyed by PostTrack gave it an average of 4.5 out of 5 stars, with 77% saying they would recommend it and have seen the film recently. I feel it was a reasonable effort and was not slow-moving. It was clearly a pro-Reagan film and glosses over some of the rough spots in his political career. Still, I found it enjoyable enough, and I think Dennis Quaid gives a groundbreaking performance as the former president. I give it a B+. That was our show for today. What did you think? Have you seen any of these depictions of the former president? Which one did you think was the best or the worst? Let me know in the comments section below. I hope you check out my Carl Vincent Vampire Hunter franchise in the comments section. I'd be honored if you subscribe to my channel and click the bell to stay informed. Until next time, this is Axel and for Kevin Given saying live long and prosper, may the force be with you and keep reaching for the stars.